Thank you, Zoltan, and thanks for the invite. I shall try to keep within 5 minutes. Difficult. What I'm going to talk to you about today is actually where we find wilderness in Europe, and I'm going to launch the first public airing of some of the new maps that we've developed, a team between Pan Parks, Altera, and the University of Leeds. I've got a few maps preliminary to start off with, which will introduce you to some of the concepts. So where are we now? I've always looked like looking at old maps, and it's not so much what you see on the map as what you don't. That is where the wilderness is, or used to be. And of course now we've covered the whole world with maps. And maps have been a key part of the WILD Foundation and the WILD Congresses. You know, here we see an early map of wilderness, remaining wilderness in Europe. It's the McCloskey and Spalding map, which was launched at the Fourth World Wilderness Congress, all drawn by hand. Of course, we now use GIS, remote sensing, digital data, and of course we see new versions of that, the Leslie map of 2000 drawn for the WCPA. And of course a recent product has been Crichton Analysis's Roadless Areas map, jointly with Google, and we can see on that it's a nice surrogate for where wilderness might be found. And recently some of the colleagues of mine, Linda C. and Stefan Fritz and a whole load of others, have been using crowdsourcing. So they've been going out there to the whole world and asking for help in defining habitats, land uses which are impacted by human activity. Of course, the best kind of global map that around is available is this one by Eric Sanderson and his team from CISON and CEDAC. It shows the human footprint. And it's the green areas as here in Salamanca are interested in as wilderness areas that our eyes are immediately drawn to. And of course they've used that map to develop this product, the last of the wild. It's all of the remaining wild ecosystems in the world. And Europe's pretty blank on that map. But of course if we look at the world without humans, we might see this potential vegetation map. So Stefan was saying Zoltan was saying how we've altered the landscape. And we can see on this map here that Europe would mainly have been covered with forest. And some work by Earl Ellis at the University of Maryland has shown how, over the last 300 years, we've ploughed our way, we've cut our way, we've hunted our way across most of the landscape. So in 2000, you can see how wild has really shrunk across the whole globe. And of course, it's normal to look at our impact on the world in terms of agriculture and population. So here's a population density map. We're all probably familiar with that, and probably familiar with a map about global land cover. But there are some other views of the world which we might not necessarily be so familiar with. So the Anthropocene maps, again, part of the work that Earl Ellis has been doing. And of course, we've built, and we've got roads, and we've got shipping routes to move all our stuff about, and we've got air networks, and most of you have travelled here by plane. I rode 1,000 miles on a motorbike as it happens. And of course we're now in the digital age, so people are following this online across the world hopefully, and you know, this is a map of internet and population, so we've got new communication methods. And of course Facebook, things like that, these social networks, really change our view of the world and shrink space effectively. And as a geographer I'm really interested in that. And a colleague, is Ben here yet? Ben Hennick? Not here yet, but Ben's got some really cool maps that he's going to show you. He's going to have them in the foyer and he's in the plenary sessions. But stretching the world, not by geographical space, but by population space. So each cell on this map represents one person, and of course the world gets distorted, but we can plot some of those networks, those global city networks, road networks, rail networks, on that network, on that global cartogram. Actually, if we look at it the other way around, it's more interesting. Here we see a map that Ben and I kind of worked on, and this is global remoteness. So we're stretching the map according to remoteness, a sort of nice indicator of wilderness. And notice how the US, the lower 48, and Europe look like one of Zoltan's deflated balloons. They've just shrunk, because nowhere's very far from anywhere. If we look back at the human footprint and zoom in at Europe, we see there's not a lot of green on that map. It's mainly in the north. And we can zoom in, you can look at the last of the wild, it's mainly white. Mostly the boreal forests and the tundra. We look at the UK, completely white. And yet, if we look at it in more detail, and this is some work that we developed for John Muir Trust, I see Stuart in the foreground there, you can see a pattern repeating itself. So wilderness can be quite fractal. We look at Scotland, and we've developed some maps with SNH, and we've been able to develop core wildland areas, and Catherine Harry's here and is going to talk about that later in the week. And we've done some local level mapping work with the national parks, and we can see these patterns repeating themselves. And the green areas on this are obviously the wildest, and the brown are the least wild. I'm sorry if you're colourblind, this will look just like shades of grey. The thing that I really want to launch, though, is the new European Wilderness Index. And this is a draft map which comes out of the Wilderness Register. And we've brought together maps about vegetation, about grazing density, to create a potential natural vegetation map. Obviously, the green end of the spectrum is the most wild on this again. We've overlaid that with maps of remoteness from settlements and human influence, remoteness from access and roads, and created a final wilderness continuum map, which is in some of the reports coming out later in the week. We then, of course, top slice that and say, where are the wildest areas? And there's an altitudinal and a latitudinal pattern here, the furthest north and the highest altitude. And of course, what we've done with the Wilderness Register is ask countries to return to us those areas which they designate as wilderness and protect as wilderness. And again, you see this latitudinal, altitudinal grade, and we've graphed that, of course, as well by country. The interesting thing is looking at those areas which have wilderness quality, which are protected under Natura 2000 and the CDDA protected planet data, and those which aren't. Those which are no longer, don't have any protection, but they are wilderness. And of course, I'll be talking later about Nature Needs Half, but you can look at the opportunities for creating new wilderness designated areas, expanding that to protect those areas which do have wilderness quality. And there's some maps showing other countries in Europe. And of course, you look at a country like the Netherlands, has a very dense protected area network, but there's very little of it which is actually protected as wild. And then finally, I just want to finish on this model, this developing model. I mean, this is what we used to have in terms of protected areas, little green blotches everywhere. We're now used to this model of cores, corridors, and carnivores, where we change things and connect them up. We've got a pan parks there. And tomorrow, hopefully, we'll have a large network of more pan parks that Zoltan's talked about, but also rewilding areas. And then hopefully, as that develops, some of those rewilding areas will be donated to the protected areas network, become part of pan parks perhaps, and new ones will appear. And that's what I want to leave you with for now. Thank you very much.